awesome panel. I'm glad to have everyone here, and I've been having such a blast at 3XP so far. Yeah, be sure to check out the Decrypt booth or right by Avalanche if you haven't yet, and snag a GG hat. But listen, today we're here to talk about the importance of reputation and achievements in Web3 gaming. We have some amazing panelists here, and so I'd love to start with some introductions. Can you each tell a little bit to the crowd about who you are and what you're working on in Web3 gaming?
Sure. Hi, my name is Matt. I actually split my time between two companies. I work at a VR metaverse called High Street, but I'm here today as the Chief Gaming Officer for Soulbound, which is a gaming achievement and reputation platform that we've been building for the last year or so. If you've seen Gavin or Dub out in the crowd, apparently everyone knows Dub, and y'all should say hi to them. And yeah, we're just excited about building the next generation of achievements and figuring out how to reward gamers for the things they do using the power of the immutability of the blockchain.
Hi, my name is John. I'm representing Game7 and Summon. So Game7 is a Web3 acceleration DAO. It's really working on kind of like making sure that the next iteration of gaming isn't owned by a few, but rather the many. So really making sure that Web3 gaming isn't kind of controlled by a few of the large incumbents that currently control gaming. And the goal is to have it be a meritocratic DAO where everyone has a say and everyone helps shape kind of the future of gaming. And so Summon was really built out of necessity to help support that. So it's a governance tool, it's a community management tool, and it really helps kind of track achievements and reputation within the DAO in order to support that goal that Game7 has.
Good morning. My name is Ross Groves. I'm here with Team Liquid. So we are a pro esports org in the more traditional game titles. We have about 16 competitive rosters right now across different game titles. But we are also breaking into Web3 games and bringing some of our content creators into the fold. We're partnering with some game studios and getting some Team Liquid branding in-game items as kind of our first foray into Web3. And we want to really just be able to bring our fans into Web3 and give them a safe way to onboard and to try these great new games that we see coming around.
So let's get asking the big questions first. What does reputation look like in Web3 gaming for gamers, and how is that similar or different from what it looks like in traditional Web2 gaming?
I would say that right now there isn't really reputation in Web2 gaming outside of the walled castles that each game, or like maybe Blizzard might have a few games in their circle, but your reputation is within that specific space. And I think that one of the most exciting things about Web3 is this theoretical interoperability, where if you have spent a lot of time building worlds, a lot of people have visited, or you've one of the top players in EV.io, it doesn't just stay there. As new things come, you are recognized for everything that you do across all these different worlds and games. And I think that's really exciting because, you're not just walled away. You're able to take everything you do and take it everywhere and own your data.
Yeah, I just kind of double down on a lot of that, right? Where it's like, reputation right now, I say in Web3, is something that's like kind of this new emerging thing that a lot of people are focusing on. I think the potential application of it is really quite interesting. But I think currently it's a little bit fragmented, right? It's pretty early days, but I think the potential for it is absolutely massive. The portability of it, not having to be stuck in these walled gardens, because a lot of things could be, saved on chain. And so this notion of kind of this, resume, on-chain resume for all the things that you've done, and the portability of that is quite interesting. I would say that it's kind of a bit of a double-edged sword. I'm a huge privacy proponent, and so there's a lot of kind of like that ask not to track that's messed up a lot of the user acquisition and things like this. So I think a lot of people are seeing that anything on chain, you can scrape all this data and use it for a bunch of things, but it's a bit of a double-edged sword. So I think there needs to be a little nuanced thought in how this is utilized responsibly, so we don't turn into, rather than the problems we had with Facebook, right, and Google, just on a massive scale that literally anybody can use, rather than a few of these large companies. So, but yeah, it's quite interesting. And a lot of cool people, panel included, working on it.
Yeah, so for us at Team Liquid, we're an esports team. We're here to win. We're here to win tournaments, championships, trophies. As we start to build rosters in the eventual competitive Web3 games, it's going to be the same approach. We're going to be out there to compete and win. That's where our reputation is really founded. We're not a merch company, we're not just a talent company, we're a team, and that will always be our #1 goal. So I think that's how we really approach it and think about it. But then we also have 160 athletes and streamers who all need to really exude our values, and I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind as well. Reputation can touch a lot of different, parts of our organization, so we need to keep that in mind, that whoever we partner with, and even with brands and sponsors, we always need to be aligned and thinking about our fans and what they really care about.
Yeah, this esports conversation makes me think about like reputation in a broader sense, and less in sort of like a commodified sense. And I wonder, like, to what extent should we commodify reputation on the blockchain? Because there is sort of one end of it that could feel sort of very Black Mirror-esque, right? But then there's another end of it that could really be rewarding for gamers. So like, where do you guys draw the line in terms of like, what do you think makes sense for Web3 gaming now in the future?
Yeah, I mean, I think that obviously things are going to evolve and change, but at least for Soulbound, our current thought process is that it should be opt-in. Especially with something that is a soul-bound NFT or data where it's locked against your wallet theoretically permanently. It shouldn't be something that you get like sent to you and like that's now this thing's attached to you. It should be something that you be like, yes, I want to get this badge or this achievement, knowing that it's going to be public, knowing it could be used as a basically a new age cookie, not against you, but it is a data point. But it should be you choose to opt into it, because ultimately, gamers and consumers are not stupid. But I think that in the past, Web 2 things kind of scrape that data, thinking that people wouldn't know that data was valuable or just took it without. And now people are getting smarter, and they realize that data has value, that they should have the opportunity to choose what data they choose to share and what they don't. And so I think that it's important that people feel like they're in control of that data. And so I think that a lot of these systems should be opt-in as opposed to just being like forced upon you based on your actions.
Yeah, I mean, like when I say privacy is not secrecy, right? So you can't misconstrue those two. Privacy is the ability to optionally share your data or opt into it, right? And so I believe as long as we're kind of having a responsible dialogue to this and people are like informed about how their data is going to be used, I mean, I think that's what's kind of nice about Web3 is that you see like a lot of people are very paranoid, right, or very hyper-focused on how their data is used or what is collected. So I think we have a great opportunity to like really build some standards here, which is another thing that I think is interesting, that there's like so many different standards, and how that coalesces to become like one unified standard and utilized, I think will be interesting to see develop, and maybe we could chat about that. But it's like, I really think that hopefully the space pushes it toward a more responsible usage than, like you mentioned, just scraping and using it for whatever you want and like having no idea where that kind of data goes. But it really kind of requires like community will, and also kind of the builders like building in that like mindset.
Yeah, I'll just say we're just still at such a preliminary stage. Gamers, as we know, have very mixed feelings about Web3 and all the different verticals they're in. So we're taking a very cautious approach. We're crawl, walk, run. We're doing a little bit of NFTs, but we don't call them that. They're digital collectibles, and they make sense with some of our other collectible items that we've already been doing. So we're very much like easing our fans into it and showing them that it is a safe space, and there are going to be just eventually great games that you're going to want to play, never mind the blockchain part of it.
Yeah, I think that one thing that is good that people are aware of, but maybe there's a negative to this idea of like we watch all this Black Mirror stuff and we get really paranoid about what a gamer's like credit score or something that looks like. And I think that in my mind it's very similar to the early DLC like conversations where people were so afraid that games are suddenly going to be like, oh, it's free, but every time you die you got to pay 99 cents. And like that could have happened, but I think that in general as DLC evolved, the gaming community and the developers found this happy medium of like what was acceptable, in terms of like maybe cosmetics are okay, but certain pay-to-win things are not. And I think in that same way, a lot of this stuff is scary in that if you take it to the extreme of like how it could be used maliciously, there is some scary things there, but I don't think that's how. I think that it's a conversation, right, where we have this new opportunity to look at all this new technology, to build new games and worlds around new data points. And we have to find that area. What do people feel comfortable with? What information do games want? And then find that balance.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting to point, and like maybe push back a little bit on like, you know, we put line on that, right? Because it's like things could always be better, right? Or like more balanced. But it's kind of interesting. So like Game 7 did like this game developer report, and we talked to like over 100 game developers who were building the space. And like a lot of them had kind of like a Web 2 kind of background, right, in Web 3. And I think the thing that was really interesting in talking to the vast majority of those is like, we talked with players, we talked with devs, and we realized that like both of them are really unhappy with the current state of games, because like developers have been pushed into like DLC or free to play, right? And like every quarter, like, hey, we have to hit our numbers, so we have to like tweak it, right? And like charge people, and they know that it's actually like not focused on making a good, fun game. It's really focused on like monetization, monetizing their users, like eking out every like penny from them, right? And then game players are really frustrated because it's like, okay, I bought the full game, but oh, actually the full game with the DLC, you know, and the expansion, right? And so, it's just kind of like my little pushback where it's like, I think that, you know, if we're not kind of like really thoughtful and people really like take an active role in making sure that we align on kind of like maybe the most optimal form, I think we'll get into something that's a little suboptimal, which I think gaming is like honestly like right now.
Something else I just kind of thought of is like, when I think about reputation and social achievements and like what platforms are already kind of doing this in like a Web 2 way, I kind of think about Reddit and like karma, and I wonder if there's a way, because that to me doesn't feel so intrusive, right? Like, because I think one extreme end of the sort of social system where if you were sort of basing people's behavior and assigning them some sort of like reputation score based on that, you know, like we saw some drama with FaZe Clan in the past couple weeks, and there's some conflict there at that org, and you know, if we lived in a world where, you know, someone would get upvotes and downvotes based on that, and that had real world implications, that might be kind of problematic, even if someone is wrong, you know, or whatnot. But I wonder if like a system maybe more like Reddit would make sense for like the reputation side of things, where it's like, okay, yeah, like it's sort of like Twitter is kind of like this too. I mean, what kind of systems do you think could exist in a Web3 sort of version of that, or extrapolation of those ideas for gaming?
Yeah, at least for me, like the way I look at reputation nowadays is if I'm going on Yelp or Amazon or Steam and I see someone is like really loving or hating a game or a thing, I quickly check to see they have 1 or 2 reviews, like are they like a plant, or they have like thousands of reviews. And then I go, okay, well, probably this is a real person. This is not just like a hit job or whatever. Like they're just genuinely saying the thing. But I think that we can probably go much further than that. You know, I think that, you know, as we see, as we're getting into more of this like kind of culture war where you have products and people, they either just like they either vote up or down. There is no middle ground. There's no like, yeah, this is good, here's my nuanced take. It's all about like, I don't like this because it disagrees with my thing. And I think that the more that we can say, oh, I don't know if any of you guys have ever played Metal Gear Solid 2, but the part of this idea of what a bad future looks like is when all information is all treated the same, where someone who could be a doctorate in something, their opinion is treated the same as a 12-year-old's opinion on it, because we have no idea whose opinion actually is informed by fact and who is able to say something funny and memey. And I think it's important that we find that truth, because in a way, if we allow information to go down to the most common denominator, then we're not going to have any kind of, I think that's part of what we're seeing, some of the bad things are happening in society nowadays. And maybe that's extrapolating too much, but.
Yeah, I mean, I've been kind of really passionate about like the decentralized identity space for quite some time, right? But it's like kind of the path of companies there is kind of littered with the bodies of people who tried, and I think it's kind of interesting because it's like, yeah, when you talk about something like Reddit, right? You know, like there's entire companies, or probably more products, not formal companies, but who like you can buy upvotes, right? Or like buy front page, right? And so I think it's like, how much are you valuing and leveraging the reputation? I think a lot of people, when they think of like identity and reputation, they're like, oh, eventually I can get like a decentralized credit score and get a loan, right? But every company who's tried to do that, there's with enough time, resources, and effort, like it's this game of cat and mouse that you're not really going to win. Like, something bad is going to happen. And so that's why I really like kind of like gaming communities, because it's not really like high stakes, right? Like your reputation, you're not really like giving them like money, right? Like maybe you're giving them some rewards or like access or like other things. And so I really like this like notion of these small kind of gaming communities or large gaming communities. You starting to have this like composite reputation, which then can be leveraged for like more things. Because people spend a ton of time and effort, right? And so it becomes like, are you willing to basically spend this time, effort, reputation, and engagement? Like how much is that value, value to you? And like how hard is it basically to get there? And so I think like through engagement and through kind of like effort, you can have like a little bit stronger kind of Sybil resistance than even sometimes with IDs, which you could just purchase online. And so it's kind of interesting to see it grow a little more organically grassroots, rather than trying to have a lot of these DID approaches that are like, hey, here's the standard, everyone should adopt mine. I think like communities and gaming especially have a great opportunity to maybe like bootstrap that in a more organic way.
Yeah, this kind of brings up another topical conversation that I've been seeing in our staff chats. There's a fear of like deep fakes and misinformation, and how are we going to handle that with, I've mentioned the 160 public-facing figures at our organization, not to mention our CEOs and things like that. We need a verification mechanism with all of our content. We put out a ton of content every day, and there's going to be fake content coming out as well, and that's a real fear. So I expect the blockchain partners that we eventually bring in will be able to help us with that and give us a way to show our fans that you can trust this content that we're putting out, and if something looks fishy, it probably is.
Yeah, something that's really fascinating that I'm kind of realizing here is that we're talking about reputation and achievements, but they are kind of separate right now. I mean, when you think about achievements, yes, like achievements give you reputation, but we're talking about like a ton of other stuff that's like super important when it comes to like social media, society, AI, where all that's going. And I mean, to jump off your point, Ross, about AI and all of this, like my picture that you see up here was made by AI. And so it's kind of convincing. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of, I think it looks like me. So, it is a real potential tool or threat, depending on how it's used, of course. But something that I also think about on the reputation side, before we kind of jump into the achievements and like what that could look like and interoperability and all that stuff, is actually thinking about like reputation and how it could actually create a culture of like social accountability, and also just create a more positive and like friendly gaming environment. I mean, I think, I've played over 2,000 hours of Overwatch and over 2,000 hours of Apex Legends on PC, and in all of those hours, I have encountered so much toxicity as a woman playing video games. And it's been insane. Like, you would not believe the amount of horrible, horrible things that people have said. Not just about me, but also just in general, like very bad words have been said frequently. And I think the reason that this happens is because there is like so much anonymity in gaming, and we have, these people are just free to say these things without repercussions. Like their reputation, right, is not affected in any way. And so, I mean, obviously it's not an easy decision to make or an easy conversation to have, but like, is there a way that reputation like could be implemented to help make gaming less toxic and more friendly for everybody?
Yeah, I think it's a delicate balancing act. I think that if you go too heavy with the control, I mean, I was a 14-year-old boy once. I probably said stupid things online, and I probably should have been, yelled at or punished or got a timeout. But at the same time, I don't think it should be a death sentence. I think that people should be reminded of like these are real people. That people should be rewarded for good behavior. I think that like the nice thing about Overwatch and things like that is that you can vote. Hey, these members of my team that were helpful or good members. But a lot of the reputation stuff is a black box where you just vote. You don't know really what Blizzard's doing on the back end, but you just assume that it's working towards a better thing. So I think there's definitely a lot of ways that we can improve that.
Yeah, their endorsement system was like kind of good at first, but then it quickly just became like, okay, like if you talk at all in game, you're getting an upvote, Right.
Yeah, and that's the thing is that I think a lot of these things are done in good faith, and then they get used as like new tools to like manipulate the system. Yeah.
But could these things exist? Like, should they exist as like soulbound tokens or like transactions on chain? Like, is there a reason to like cryptify this, as we sometimes say?
Yeah, well, I was just gonna say, like, I think it's a really interesting topic, right? Because it's like I used to play League of Legends, and it's like one of the more toxic communities, right? And I think it's been interesting to see this kind of game of cat and mouse that they played, where it's like, there's two ways to kind of influence that. It's like carrot and stick, right? And I think they've really like leaned in on the stick, where like recently they announced kind of like AI is going to auto ban people, right? And I think it's like a 15x increase in efficiency or something, some like AI threaded through everything, right? But I think like the carrot aspect, a lot of people aren't necessarily like focusing on that, right? League of Legends had this thing where if you like get reported as a good teammate or helpful, then like if you get to enough, then you get this like thing around your profile photo and you load, and it's like, people don't really care about that, right? They're like, oh, if I get reported, if I'm toxic, like I lose that. Okay, whatever. I'm chat restricted. I get banned. I make another account, right? And so like, I think there's a lot to unpack there. But I really think it's been kind of interesting because like at Summon, we've really thought deeply about this incentive structure and kind of like the carrot and stick. And like one of our core kind of principles is that we want to incentivize positive community engagement. And that positive aspect is, one, very important, but I think it's also kind of loosely defined. I think every community kind of defines its own culture. But in like kind of working in kind of the Game 7 community implementation of their system, it was really like amply rewarding people who are positive and helpful. Like we basically have kind of a system to reward people who are mentors or people who are helpfuls. There's kind of this notion some other places use where it's like kudo points, where you can actually like reward people for being helpful. So I think it's just like making it a little bit more direct how you're rewarding people and engaging. Because like right now it's just like, it seems like a lot of game mentality is like, let's just ban these people or chat restrict them or like punish them. Yeah. But oftentimes that doesn't really solve the issue, right?
They just create new accounts. I know a guy who had over 40 Apex Legends accounts because he kept getting banned. Can crypto fix this?
I mean, I think so. I mean, I think especially, with like metaverses and worlds where, especially as you're building economies, you can choose to, restrict access based on, and we kind of see this now, where like on Discord or certain things, you can't join certain servers if your account is less than 2 weeks old or things like that. So that way people can't just brigade. But yeah, I mean, I think everything is a double-edged sword, because when you have these systems like kudos systems, people can go, well, we don't like this person because they have a different political view than me, or we don't like them because it's a lady, right? And we're just gonna like try to like push them off and get all of our friends to push them off. And so I think in a lot of ways it's about moderating the stick, right? Where you don't want to have systems that people can manipulate to take revenge or go after people they don't like. It needs to be based around specific actionable items, right? Like specifically harassing people in games or scamming people. So yeah, I definitely think our current systems need a lot more work.
That's interesting. You mentioned metaverses, and it just makes me think: is our digital persona becoming more public and more attached to our identity? Is that layer of anonymity kind of fading away in Web3? I don't know, but maybe that starts to change the behavior and the way we think about ourselves in the digital realm.
Yeah, I think I would love to talk a little bit about interoperability. I think a lot of folks, as a journalist, I get a lot of pitches from folks saying, oh yeah, we have the interoperable metaverse, but it's like one company building one game and they have a bunch of mini games within the bigger game. And I'm like, to me, that's not really interoperability. What do you think interoperability is actually possible? And if so, what could it look like in the context of Web3 gaming and achievements and identity and this sort of conversation that we've been having?
Yeah, I mean, I think that interoperability can be anything. Where I think that one of the earliest cases of interoperability, going back to Kojima, is when you play the first Metal Gear, he reads your memory card, and one of the bosses reads your memory card, and he's like, oh, I see you like to play this game. Ugh. And it's like, but Metal Gear didn't talk to these other game companies to say, hey, can we use your data to whatever, but they use it in a fun, interesting way. And I think, that's the nice thing about this interoperability, is that you don't need to specifically get permission to use, if they're just data points. So if you have 5,000 bat wings in one game, you could go into this other world and we could say, oh, well, we see you have a lot of bat wings in your inventory, so we're going to automatically make your home base be a cave or something, right? And I think that's really interesting, where this idea that a sword is going to be the same sword in every game is unrealistic, because you can't balance a game around other people's economies. But you can use that data in ways that can provide ways to delight and excite and do interesting things to customize the space.
Do you think that could happen if we had like sort of, so right now I kind of think about like, okay, I have my MetaMask and my Coinbase wallet like plugins on my browser. Maybe there's like some kind of single sign-on experience that's universal where we have our achievements sort of there and you can take them across different places. Could that help with like matchmaking and games? I sort of think about, you know, how sometimes you go into a game as a fresh player, and if you're coming from, you know, being GM in Overwatch and then you jump into another game and it's sort of like, okay, this person is clearly very good at this type of character. Maybe there's a way that we could engineer matchmaking systems in a way that it actually pre-queues them and sort of pre-fills lobbies that are with players like that, so that they don't have to play like placement matches. And overall, that kind of stuff can just like really improve the game experience, because you have this like broader context of like a player profile and the kinds of skill levels that everybody's at in different games.
100%. I think that the skill level thing is more dangerous because that can be manipulated and people go, I'm going to buy my way in. But when it comes to motivations, you know, one of the things we're doing at Soulbound is creating these like gamer motivation profiles. People, they choose, be like they answer this quiz and they figure out what things excite them about games. And theoretically, if we work with a game and they can come in and be like, oh, I'm more excited about healing people and being cooperative, or I'm more excited about, you know, that moment to moment like, then yeah, you can get placed on the teams with people who feel the same way, and then that way there's not this ideological clash. And I think that is an easier fix than doing something where, oh, I know that I'm like a top 10% player, because again, you know, then I think people will try to find ways to manipulate that system to be like, I just bought or stole someone's account that's a top 10 player, and now I'm in the league.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting, right? Because it's like the matchmaking, the positive stuff that like making it more efficient, but then, you know, if you also talk about like the negative reputation, right? Like having that be portable. And so it becomes like having that optionality where it's like convenience versus like, you know, maybe you want to not have people who are like doing negative things like in certain lobbies. And so it becomes interesting because it's like, how do you differentiate between like a new player versus like not, you know, unless all of a sudden it's like, we get our Soulbound token, we're the social security card, right? You know, and like you start just like requiring people, like much like in Korea, right? Where it's like a little bit more kind of like assigned. But yeah, anyway, not to go down the rabbit hole, but you know, I think to touch on the point where you said like for the metaverse and how it's expanding, like I think there was a really great tweet. I forget who tweeted it, but it's basically saying that like the metaverse is more of a point in time as opposed to a thing. That very much like resonates with me, because like I don't really see it as being this like one monolithic metaverse that's maybe owned by like one huge company, right, or like some conglomerate. I really see it as you know, being in Web3, like I really think that, you know, the community growth and user-generated content and a lot of that is what's going to make kind of the metaverse happen. So ideally, that's how I see it kind of happening, is it's a bunch of interconnected and interoperable kind of pieces, but that really does require that kind of interoperability. And so I think like having standards, right, and having kind of people be able to interact and interface is very important in how this develops. But it's interesting seeing companies like Meta, right, who are like obviously have a very kind of maybe walled garden approach, but we'll just have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, I just think that one place that a blockchain can actually help us, specifically with the metaverse, is that, you know, with Roblox and Meta, you have no recourse. If they decide that they don't like you or something happens, they can just pull all your worlds, all your assets, and it's over, right? And so I have a friend of mine, she's a trans woman, and obviously right now it's, you know, a political thing. She got brigaded. She lost her Roblox account. She was making $350,000 a year on that. And she's like, oh, I have no recourse, right? I can't even just like give my assets, my world to someone else. It's all gone, right? And thankfully, you know, she was able to communicate, find someone at Roblox, but if you don't have those resources, you have no control at all. And I think that, you know, we don't necessarily want to give 100% of control to the user, but you want them to have like, if you're expecting people to build storefronts in Horizon or Roblox, like in the real world, you can't just grab it and take it from them whenever you feel like it. That's not, you know, so I think that we need to find this balance where, you know, I think that if you're a creator in this world, that should be part of your reputation.
Yeah, because that goes hand in hand, right? Like, you know, that moment in time where it's like, you know, kind of like your digital life is like maybe more important or like more value than your physical life. Like, you know, that being the definition of metaverse, if all of a sudden this can be seized, right, or just taken away, like that could be somebody's livelihood, and it already is people's livelihood, like you just referenced, right? There's significant money to be made here, and so I think that's like a huge piece, and it's kind of interesting to see the dialogue between it's like, you know, right now, like you mentioned, companies don't have any way of, you can't fight back, you can't push back against it, right? It's like a private platform, they can do whatever they want. So yeah, I totally agree that that's something that really needs to be considered and to get to that level, right? Before we can make that leap to like something that's fully metaverse, right? Or have much of my life online. Like you don't want that kind of like, to be beholden to like a single company and kind of like their wills, right? Or maybe like your political views, or if you don't agree, or like get degraded. So yeah, that's crazy.
I think we're going to see a cross-metaverse publishing platform eventually, where you can go, here's my Soulbound world, and it'll publish to Horizon and Roblox and Fortnite Creative all at the same time. So that way, if one peg falls under, you can be like, I don't care. Like, you guys want to be shady? Like, we have our business in other places. We're not completely, like, beholden to X.
Do you want to go, Ross? Sorry, you're picking up the mic.
Well, I was just going to maybe take it in a different direction. I'm thinking about the topic of skill level and earning items that might be relevant in another game title in the same genre. Could it lower the barrier to entry to try a new game? I'm often reluctant to try a new game because it seems like such a grind just to get ramped up. If there's maybe like a placement system because I've already proven a skill level, or I have some things that are relevant, can I get kind of placed into the game and get dropped in further? And does that make it easier to pick it up? I don't know. Could be interesting.
Something else that came to mind on stage here is thinking about like the concept. Okay, so if we have these sort of soulbound tokens that represent our reputation and or our achievements and our skill level in a game. We've already seen this with Yuga Labs, where in their game Dookie Dash, they had delegation, where you could basically let other people play for you. And while there's certainly pros to that, obviously it allows more people who don't own a very expensive asset to be able to experience a game. The flip side of that is that it basically allows for boosting to occur, and there was boosting occurring, and people were making lots of Ethereum, thousands of dollars doing this. What do you guys think about that? And is there a way that like Web3 and soulbound tokens, like should delegation be a thing, or does that defeat the purpose of these identity tokens in the first place?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the whole kind of account boosting and stuff, it's like it's something that gaming's dealt with forever, right? Like botting, like all kinds of like kind of like hacks and modifications, right? So I don't think one, I guess, kind of question, right, is like, do I think that this should be allowed? I think personal opinion is that soulbound tokens, they're soulbound for a reason. They shouldn't be tradable, transferable. Like, I think, it really should be that person's reputation, right? Because then the system that you're building around, and a lot of systems I've seen being built around soulbound tokens, are really predicated on like, hey, it's that individual user. And so you kind of balance these systems, kind of balance the rewards, balance the incentives around that. And so like, I think if somebody came up with something and they wanted to have it be delegatable, like that would be maybe interesting, but I think it kind of defeats the purpose of like where things are moving. I think there's other ways that you could do that maybe in a more elegant way. But I think as far as kind of like, you can tell people all day until you're blue in the face you don't want them sharing or you don't want them gaming it, but it's probably going to happen. So yeah.
I think there's like big risk, big reward in that kind of thing. In that, I have an assistant who helps me sometimes, like on Sandbox, if I have a mission I want to do, play for me. But you're trusting them with your entire wallet. You're trusting them with your entire identity. So yeah, you can try to be shady or try to like team up with people, but at the end of the day, like you're putting everything on the line theoretically. So I think that in that regard, we see non-traditional living arrangements. There's lots of ways that people could maybe team up, but at some level, you can't scale that too far before it becomes unmanageable or someone just grabs it and takes it.
Do we have any questions in the audience? Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask our panelists? You can just raise your hand and we will hopefully get you a mic, or you can yell it out. No? Yes?
Shout it out.
Cool. Well, if there's no questions, we can wrap. Thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts. Really insightful panel, and I think there's so much different like possibilities that we could really have here when it comes to identity, achievements, and what all of that looks like in Web3 gaming. So a round of applause for these guys. Thank you.
Thank you.